I never thought my life would take such an unexpected turn. I, Sarah, a 45-year-old married woman and mother of a teenage daughter, always considered myself a proper and faithful person. But fate has strange ways of testing us and leading us down paths we never imagined we'd travel. It all began a few months ago when my husband Tom mentioned that his nephew Jake would be staying with us for his vacation. Jake was 22 and had just finished college. I had never met him in person, only seen him in some family photos. Tom was excited about having him at home and showing him around the city. The day Jake arrived, I was surprised by how attractive he was. Tall, with dark hair and piercing green eyes, he had an air of confidence and maturity that contrasted with his youth. Our 17-year-old daughter Emily also seemed to notice, as she dressed up more than usual for the welcome dinner. That first night, as we were eating, I noticed Jake looking at me in a particular way. It wasn't a lewd or disrespectful look, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me. Every time our eyes met, I felt butterflies in my stomach. I tried to ignore that feeling and focused on the conversation. Emily, however, didn't seem as comfortable. I saw her tense up every time Jake spoke to me or looked at me. After dinner, while we were washing dishes in the kitchen, my daughter confronted me. "Mum, did you notice how Jake was looking at you? He's Dad's nephew, for God's sake, it's disgusting." I tried to calm her down, telling her she was probably misinterpreting things, that Jake was just being friendly and there was nothing to worry about. But deep down, I knew Emily was right. I had noticed those looks, and what disturbed me most was that a part of me had enjoyed them that night. Lying next to Tom, I couldn't sleep. My mind wandered, remembering Jake's green eyes, his smile, the way his lips curved when he spoke. I felt guilty for having these thoughts, but I couldn't help it. The following days passed with growing tension. Jake was charming and helpful, always willing to lend a hand around the house or entertain Emily. But when we were alone, even if just for a few seconds, the air was charged with electricity. Our eyes would meet and time seemed to stand still. One night, Tom had to work late at the office. Emily had gone out with her friends and wouldn't be back until the next day. Jake and I were left alone in the house. I tried to keep my distance, busying myself with household chores, but I was aware of his presence in every corner of the house. Around midnight, I headed to my bedroom to sleep. I was about to close the door when I heard soft footsteps approaching. It was Jake. He stopped in front of me with that intense gaze that had been haunting me for days. "Aunt Sarah," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart raced. I knew I should stop him, tell him to leave, that this was wrong, but the words wouldn't come out of my mouth. Instead, I took a step back, allowing him to enter the room. What happened next was an explosion of pent-up passion. We kissed desperately, as if we had been waiting for this moment all our lives. His hands roamed my body urgently, awakening sensations I thought I had forgotten. I gave myself completely, forgetting for a moment who we were and how forbidden our encounter was. We made love with an intensity that left me breathless. Jake was passionate but tender, attentive to each of my reactions. He made me feel desired, beautiful, alive. For a few hours, I forgot. I was a married woman, mother of a teenager. Only Jake and I existed, our bodies intertwined in the darkness of the night. Afterwards, when the heat of passion dissipated, guilt began to take over. What had I done? How could I betray Tom, my family, like this? Jake seemed to sense my anguish. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Don't regret it. What we feel is real." Those words, instead of comforting me, only increased my confusion, because deep down, I knew he was right. What I had felt was more real and profound than anything I had experienced in years. Jake returned to his room before dawn, as if nothing had happened. I stayed awake, tormented by my thoughts and conflicting emotions. The following days were torture. I tried to act normal in front of Tom and Emily, but every time I looked at Jake, I remembered our night together. He, for his part, maintained a perfect facade of normalcy. No one would have suspected what was happening between us. A week after our first encounter, it happened again, and then again, and again. Soon it became a dangerous and addictive routine. Every night Tom worked late, Jake would sneak into my room. Our encounters were passionate, intense, filled with a connection that went beyond the physical. As the weeks passed, I realized my feelings for Jake were deepening. It wasn't just physical desire anymore. There was something more. I found myself thinking about him constantly, longing for his presence, his touch, his voice. It terrified me to realize I was falling in love. Emily, meanwhile, continued to suspect. She noticed the looks, the tension in the air. One day, she confronted me directly. "Mum, what's going on between you and Jake? And don't tell me it's nothing, because I'm not stupid." I denied everything. Of course I told her she was imagining things, that Jake was family and I would never do anything to hurt her father. The words tasted like ashes in my mouth. Emily didn't seem convinced, but she didn't insist further. However, her look of disappointment haunted me for days. Tom, for his part, seemed oblivious to everything. He was so busy with work that he barely spent time at home. When he was around, he seemed distant, tired. Our relationship had cooled off long ago, but now the distance seemed insurmountable. I wondered if he noticed it too, if he cared. One night, after making love, Jake proposed something I never expected to hear. "Let's run away together. Let's leave everything behind and start a new life." I was speechless. Part of me wanted to scream yes, to abandon everything and flee with him. But the other part, the mother, the wife, reminded me of my responsibilities, my life built over so many years. "I can't, Jake. I have a daughter, a husband, a life here." "But you're not happy," he insisted. "I see it in your eyes. You could be happy with me." Those words haunted me for days. Was I really unhappy? Or was I just dazzled by the excitement of something new, forbidden? I decided I needed time to think, to clarify my feelings. I asked Jake not to see each other for a few days. He agreed, although I could see the pain in his eyes. Those days of distance helped me reflect on my life, on my decisions. I remembered the good times with Tom, Emily's birth, the life we had built together. But I also remembered the monotony of recent years, the lack of passion, the feeling of living on autopilot. Jake had awakened something in me that I thought was dead. He had made me feel alive, desired, passionate. But was that enough to abandon everything? One night, while having dinner with Tom, I decided to talk to him. Not about Jake, of course, but about us, about our marriage. "Tom, are you happy with me?" The question seemed to take him by surprise. He looked at me confused, as if he didn't understand where this was coming from. "Of course I am. Why do you ask?" "It's just that I feel we've grown apart. We don't spend time together anymore. We barely talk." Tom sighed, putting his fork down on his plate. "You're right. I've been very busy with work lately. I promise I'll try to be more present." That conversation left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad Tom acknowledged we had been distant. On the other, his response seemed superficial, as if he didn't really understand the depth of my concern. The following days, Tom made an effort to spend more time at home, to be more attentive. But I couldn't stop comparing him to Jake. The passion, the connection I felt with the young man simply wasn't there with my husband. Meanwhile, Jake respected my request for distance, but I could feel his gaze following me every time we were in the same room. The tension between us was palpable, and I feared that at any moment Emily or Tom would notice. One afternoon, while we were all watching a movie in the living room, I felt Jake's hand brush mine, accidentally. That simple contact sent an electric shock through my entire body. I looked at Tom, who was absorbed in the screen, and then at Emily, who was watching us with a frown. I got up hastily, muttering an excuse about making more popcorn. In the kitchen, I tried to calm my rapid breathing. How was it possible that a simple touch affected me so much? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear the approaching footsteps. "Mum, we need to talk." Emily's voice startled me. I turned to face her accusing gaze. About what, honey? You know what, about you and Jake I can't keep, pretending I don't see what's going on. I felt the ground opening beneath my feet. My worst fear had come true. My daughter knew, Emily, No, Mom, I don't want excuses, I want the truth. Are you having an affair with Jake? The direct question left me breathless. For a moment I considered lying, denying everything, but looking into my daughter's eyes, full of pain and disappointment, I knew I couldn't keep deceiving her. Yes, I whispered, feeling tears start to roll down my cheeks. I'm so sorry, honey. Emily stepped back as if I had hit her. I saw a mix of emotions cross her face, pain, anger, disgust. How could you do this to Dad, to our family? Her words were like daggers in my heart. I wanted to explain, to make her understand that things weren't so simple, that I was suffering too. But how do you explain the complexities of love and desire to a teenager? Emily, please, let me explain. I don't want your explanations, she shouted. You're a liar, a traitor. Her screams attracted Tom and Jake's attention, who came running into the kitchen. Tom looked at the scene in confusion, while Jake paled, understanding what was happening. What's going on here? Tom asked, his voice full of concern. Emily looked at me, challenging me to tell the truth. For a moment, I considered lying, inventing an excuse. But I knew there was no turning back. It was time to face the consequences of my actions. Tom, I began, my voice trembling, I have something to tell you. The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions. I confessed everything to Tom. My affair with Jake, my confused feelings, my dissatisfaction in our marriage. I watched his face go from disbelief to pain and finally to anger. Jake tried to speak, to take some of the responsibility, but Tom kicked him out of the house, yelling that he never wanted to see him again. Emily locked herself in her room, refusing to talk to me. I was left alone in the living room, feeling my world crumbling around me. I had destroyed my family. I had betrayed the trust of the people I loved most. And for what? For a few moments of passion, for the illusion of a forbidden love. The following days were hell. Tom moved to the guest room, barely speaking to me. Emily treated me with a cold disdain that broke my heart. Jake tried to contact me several times, but I didn't answer his calls or messages. I knew I needed to distance myself from him if I wanted to have any hope of saving my family. A week after the confrontation, Tom asked me to sit down and talk. His face was gaunt, with deep circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Tom looked at me with a mixture of sadness and determination. I've been thinking a lot these past few days, he began. What you did, it has hurt me deeply, but it has also made me reflect on our marriage. I nodded, waiting silently for him to continue. I've realized that I'm partly to blame too, Tom said. I've distanced myself from you. I've immersed myself in work and neglected our relationship. I'm not justifying what you did, but I understand that we've both contributed to getting to this point. His words surprised me. I expected anger, recriminations, but not this reflective calm. What do you mean? I asked with a trembling voice. I mean that if you're willing, I'd like us to try to save our marriage. It won't be easy, and it will take time to rebuild trust, but I think it's worth trying, for us, for Emily. I felt tears running down my cheeks. Do you really think we can overcome this? Tom took my hand. It was the first physical contact we'd had in days. I don't know for sure, but I want to try. We could start with couples therapy. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Yes, I'd like that. And Tom, I'm so sorry, I never meant to hurt you. I know, he said softly. Now we have to work on rebuilding what's been broken. The following days were difficult, but full of small progress. We started couples therapy, where we could talk openly about our problems and learn to communicate better. Emily was still distant, but little by little she started opening up. One night, while we were washing dishes together, she finally spoke. Mum, I'm still angry and hurt by what you did, she said. But I miss you. I miss how we used to be. I hugged her tightly, feeling my heart breaking and mending at the same time. I miss you too, honey, and I'll do everything possible to regain your trust. Jake respected our decision to have no contact. I found out from Tom that he had returned to his city. Sometimes I thought about him, about the moments we shared, but each day those thoughts became more distant, like a dream I was finally waking up from. With time, our family began to heal. It wasn't easy. There were days of doubts and arguments, moments when it seemed like all the effort was in vain, but little by little we rebuilt trust and love. Tom and I learned to value each other more, to dedicate time to our relationship. We rediscovered the pleasure of small things, walking hand in hand, cooking together, sharing our thoughts and dreams. Emily, over time, began to trust me again. Our conversations became deeper and more honest. I taught her that everyone makes mistakes, but what's important is to learn from them and strive to be better. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized that the affair with Jake, although painful and destructive, had been a catalyst for the change our family needed. It had forced us to face our problems, to truly communicate, to value what we had. I don't entirely regret it. Not because I justify my actions, but because the pain and struggle led us to a better place. I learned that true love isn't just passion and emotion, but commitment, forgiveness, and hard work. Today, years after those events, I can say we are a stronger and more united family. Tom and I have renewed our love. With a depth and maturity we didn't have before, Emily has grown to be a compassionate and understanding young woman, capable of seeing the complexities of human relationships. My advice to anyone who is tempted to seek excitement outside their relationship is this: talk to your partner, seek help if necessary, but don't betray the trust of those you love. The easy path may seem tempting, but the consequences can be devastating. True love isn't perfect. It has ups and downs. It requires effort and commitment. But when you cultivate it with patience and honesty, it blossoms into something beautiful and lasting. As I watch Tom smile at me from across the room, I feel a deep gratitude. We've been through a lot. We've made mistakes, but we've grown together, and that, in the end, is what really matters.